The stormy evening rain came suddenly, like the sky had opened its heart and poured everything down. The streets were already wet from earlier showers, but now the storm grew stronger. Water rushed along the sides of the road, forming little rivers that carried fallen leaves, wrappers, and pieces of paper. Streetlights flickered in the mist, their glow spreading weak and blurry through the curtain of water. Most people had already found shelter. Shops pulled down shutters early, buses grew emptier, and cars hurried past, their headlights cutting through the foggy rain. Yet on one lonely corner stood an elderly woman. She looked so small against the storm, her body bent from age and weakness. Her thin gray coat clung to her shoulders, heavy with water, and her broken umbrella barely gave her cover. The wind had twisted its frame, bending the metal, and the cloth flapped helplessly. Still, she tried to hold it above her head, her wrinkled hands shaking. She shivered as another gust of wind blew hard. Her shoes, old and cracked, were soaked through, and each step she tried to take splashed in cold puddles. She stopped, sighing, and pressed her back against the wall of a closed shop. Her breathing was heavy, and her eyes darted down the street, hoping for a bus or someone kind enough to notice her. But no one stopped. People with working umbrellas walked past quickly, eyes down, caring only about escaping the storm. Then, from across the road, a man appeared. His figure was tall and strong, though his clothes were as wet as everyone else. Drops of water rolled down his face, but he didn't rush. He walked with steady steps, carrying a wide black umbrella that looked solid against the rain. His dark jacket clung to him, but there was calmness in his eyes when he noticed the elderly woman. Something inside him stirred. He could have walked past, like the others. He had his own destination, and the storm gave him every reason to hurry, but his heart didn't allow it. The image of her struggling, frail, cold, and alone made his chest tighten. He thought of how it must feel to stand there, invisible to the world. He knew in that moment he could not leave her like that. He crossed the street carefully, water splashing under his boots. The cars honked as he hurried, but he didn't care. When he reached her, he stopped a few steps away, not wanting to scare her. His voice was calm, deep, and gentle. "Ma'am, you look cold. Please, come under my umbrella. Let me help you." The woman looked up, her tired eyes wide with surprise. She blinked against the raindrops that ran down her face. For a second, she hesitated, unsure if she should trust a stranger. But when she saw the kindness in his eyes, real, warm, and without judgment, her shoulders softened. She nodded weakly. He stepped closer and held the umbrella above her, shielding her from the heavy rain. She gasped softly at the sudden relief, at the dry space above her head. For the first time that evening, she was not drowning in the storm. She whispered, her voice thin and trembling, "Thank you, young man. Thank you." The man gave a small smile, almost shy, and said, "No need to thank me. No one should stand in this weather alone." He moved slightly so the umbrella covered her more than himself. Rain soaked his shoulder, but he didn't adjust. His only concern was her. The street was still loud with the sound of water tires, hissing, raindrops drumming on rooftops, thunder rolling far away. But under the umbrella, there was a small, quiet space, a fragile bubble of safety. The woman felt it. She felt the difference one stranger's kindness could make. As they stood there, the man asked gently, "Are you waiting for someone? Or are you trying to go home?" His voice wasn't just words. It carried genuine care, like he wanted to make sure she was safe. The woman swallowed and tried to answer, though her voice broke. I was waiting for the bus, but I think they stopped running." She lowered her eyes, ashamed of her weakness. But he only nodded with understanding. "Then let me help you," he said softly. "I'll walk with you until you're safe. Don't worry, you're not alone now." The elderly woman looked at him again, searching his face. What she saw was simple honesty, nothing more, nothing less. She felt a small warmth bloom in her chest, something she hadn't felt in a long time, the comfort of being cared for around them. The storm raged on, but in that one moment, it no longer felt as cruel. The night was still dark, the streets still wet, but a new light had appeared, a light not from a street lamp, but from human kindness. For the first time in many years, the woman felt hope in the middle of a storm. A gentle, sheltered rain was still falling heavy, the sound like endless drums on rooftops and pavement. The man tilted his umbrella so the elderly woman was fully covered, even though it meant his shoulder and half of his arm were exposed. Water soaked through his jacket, chilling his skin, but he didn't care. He kept his eyes on her, making sure each step she took was safe. Her shoes made soft splashes in the puddles as she tried to walk. Her knees shook slightly, and her breathing came slow and tired. The man noticed and slowed his pace to match hers. He spoke softly, so his voice would not startle her. "Do you live far from here, Mom?" She shook her head gently. "No, just a few streets away. But I could not walk alone in this storm." Her voice cracked, almost breaking into a cough. The man nodded. "Then let me walk with you. We'll go slowly. You'll be safe." The woman looked up at him with watery eyes, not just from the rain, but from emotion. Strangers had passed her all evening, never stopping, never caring. Yet this one man, who had no reason to help, had chosen to stay. Her heart whispered gratitude, though her lips could barely form the words. As they walked side by side, the city seemed quieter under the umbrella. Around them, cars sped by, headlights flashing, horns echoing in the storm. But beneath that small circle of shelter, the world felt different. It felt almost gentle. The man asked carefully, "What is your name?" She smiled weakly. "Margaret." "And yours?" "David," he replied, his tone steady. "It's nice to meet you, Margaret, though I wish it was under better weather." She chuckled softly, her laugh fragile, but warm. "Yes, the sky chose to test us tonight." Their steps continued slowly along the wet sidewalk. Neon lights from nearby shops reflected in the puddles, shimmering like broken rainbows. Water dripped from rooftops, forming tiny waterfalls that splashed into the street. The storm was strong, but Margaret felt something stronger beside her. Kindness. David adjusted the umbrella again, angling it so not even a drop touched her. His own hair was wet, sticking to his forehead, but he ignored it. Inside his chest, there was a quiet satisfaction. Helping her felt natural, like something he was meant to do. After a while, Margaret sighed, her voice softer now. "You know, David, most people would have walked past me. They would not stop in this weather. But you stayed." David looked at her kindly. "I couldn't just leave you there. My mother used to say, if you see someone struggling, you don't walk away, you walk closer." Those words have stayed with me. Her eyes glistened. She whispered, "Your mother raised a good man." The rain grew heavier for a moment, pounding the umbrella so hard that it trembled in his hand. Thunder rolled across the sky, deep and long. Margaret shivered and pressed a hand to her chest. David noticed at once it shifted closer, making the circle of shelter tighter. "Don't worry," he said calmly. "We're almost there." "Which street is it?" "Just ahead," she replied, pointing with her trembling fingers. As they turned the corner, the neighborhood grew quieter. Houses lined the street, most of their windows glowing with warm yellow light. Curtains drawn, families safe inside. Margaret's eyes softened as she saw familiar shapes, but her steps slowed, as though each movement took great effort. David noticed her weakness and offered his arm. "Here, hold on to me. It will make it easier." Margaret hesitated for a second, then gently placed her hand on his arm. His strength was steady, like an anchor. Together, they moved carefully through the puddles, the umbrella shielding them both. For a few moments, there was silence between them. Only the sound of rain filled the air, but inside their hearts, something unspoken passed a quiet understanding, a bond forming between the strangers. Finally, Margaret spoke, her voice almost a whisper. "Sometimes I feel invisible in this world. People walk by me like I am not there. Tonight, I thought I might stay in the rain forever. But then you came." David's heart ached at her words. He looked at her gently and said, "You are not invisible. You matter. Everyone matters. Sometimes the world forgets, but we must remind it." Her lips curved into a small smile, the kind that carries both sadness and hope. They reached a small gate, old and rusted, in front of a modest house. The paint on the walls was fading, and the garden was wild with overgrown plants, but it looked like home. Margaret's hand shook as she reached for the gate. "Thank you, David," she whispered. Her eyes filled with tears. "Without you, I would not have made it." David gave a gentle nod, his face calm, but his heart moved. "I'm glad I was here. Please, go inside and rest. You're safe now." But Margaret didn't move right away. She looked at him deeply, as though searching for something. The rain continued to fall around them, but in that moment, she seemed to forget the storm. Her mind was turning, her heart deciding. This man had shown her kindness when no one else had, and in her soul, she knew she could not let this end as a simple thank you. She had something else in mind, something that would soon change his life forever. The door opens, rain still poured, tapping hard against the umbrella as David stood by Margaret's gate. Her frail fingers trembled on the latch, but she didn't open it right away. Instead, she looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and quiet thought. The storm made the world around them loud, but between the two of them, there was silence, a silence full of meaning. "Come in, David," Margaret finally said, her voice soft yet firm. "You've already done so much, but please, I cannot let you leave in this weather. You're soaked." David hesitated. His instinct was to refuse politely. He didn't want to trouble her, and he wasn't the kind of man to expect rewards for kindness. "Oh no, ma'am," he said gently, "you don't have to. I just wanted to make sure you got home safe." But Margaret shook her head, her gray hair dripping with raindrops. "You gave me shelter when no one else would. Now let me give you shelter, too." Her tone carried a rare strength, one that came not from her body, but from her heart. David studied her face. He saw not only an old woman, but also dignity, warmth, and sincerity. Slowly, he nodded. "All right, just for a moment, until the rain slows." Margaret smiled softly and pushed the gate open. Together, they walked up the small path, their shoes splashing in the wet gravel. The umbrella shielded them until they reached the porch. There, Margaret fumbled with her keys, and with a click, the door swung open. A warm glow spilled out into the cold night, wrapping them in golden light. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lavender and old books. A single lamp glowed in the hallway, casting gentle shadows on the walls. The air was warmer, carrying a homely comfort. David closed the umbrella carefully and set it by the door, shaking off the storm before stepping inside. "Please," Margaret said, pointing to a wooden chair near a small table. "Sit down, David. I'll bring you a towel." He smiled faintly. "Thank you, Margaret." As he sat, he looked around. The house was simple, but full of character. Photographs lined the walls, black and white. Portraits of people from long ago, faded pictures of children, and landscapes of places that looked far away. A clock ticked gently in the corner, its sound steady against the fading noise of rain outside. Margaret returned with a towel and handed it to him. "Here, dry yourself before you catch a cold." David accepted it gratefully and rubbed his hair and shoulders. "You didn't have to, but thank you. You didn't have to help me either," she replied with a small smile. "Yet here we are." Her words carried weight. They were more than politeness, they were a bridge between two souls who had met by chance but connected by kindness. "Would you like some tea?" Margaret asked suddenly. David was about to say no, but her eyes pleaded gently. She wanted company, and he realized that perhaps she needed it more than she let on. He nodded. Tea would be nice. Margaret moved slowly toward the kitchen, her steps careful but steady. From where he sat, David could hear the kettle being filled, the gentle clatter of cups, and the rustle of a teabag wrapper. It was ordinary, yet in the quiet of her home, it felt almost magical. While waiting, David glanced again at the photographs. One picture caught his eye: Margaret, younger, standing proudly in front of a building, holding a certificate. Her smile was wide, full of life. He leaned closer, curious about the woman she once was. Margaret returned carrying the cups of steaming tea. Her hands shook slightly, so David quickly stood and took the tray from her. "Careful," he said kindly. "Thank you," she whispered, easing herself into a chair. They sat across from each other, steam rising between them. The warmth of the tea spread through the air, mixing with the faint sound of rain still beating against the windows. Margaret lifted her cup slowly, her eyes resting on David. "You know," she began, "sometimes life surprises us. Tonight, I thought I would collapse in that rain, but instead, I met you." David sipped his tea and nodded gently. "And I'm glad I met you too, Margaret. The world can feel cold, but small moments remind us it's not all bad." Her lips curved into a smile, but her gaze grew thoughtful. "David, may I ask you something?" "Of course," he replied. She studied him for a long moment. "Do you ever feel like life has been unfair to you?" David was silent. He didn't expect such a question, but her eyes demanded honesty. After a pause, he said, "Yes, sometimes. I've had struggles, times when I felt forgotten, but I believe in moving forward, no matter what." Margaret's eyes softened. "That is rare. Many lose hope, but you carry hope, even when soaked in rain." David chuckled lightly. "Maybe Or maybe I just know what it feels like to be alone, and I don't want others to feel it too. Her heart swelled at his words. She felt something stir deep inside her, a decision forming. This man wasn't just kind in small gestures. His kindness was rooted in who he was, and that, she thought, was something too valuable to ignore. As the rain eased outside, the house grew quieter. Margaret set her teacup down and leaned forward. Slightly, her voice was low, almost secretive. David, I have something I must tell you. Something important. Tonight, you didn't just shelter me, you changed something inside me. And I believe, perhaps I can change something for you, too. David looked at her with surprise. What do you mean? Margaret held his gaze, her wrinkled face glowing softly in the lamplight. You will see soon enough, but trust me, David, your kindness tonight will not be forgotten. And in that small house, while the storm outside began to fade, a quiet promise was born, one that would soon alter the course of his life forever. The secret gift rain had softened to a gentle drizzle, tapping lightly against the windows of Margaret's small home. Inside, the air was warm and quiet, with only the steady ticking of the old clock breaking the silence. David sat across from her, the teacup still warm in his hand. He felt comfortable, though he could not shake the weight of her last words. Your kindness tonight will not be forgotten. Margaret leaned back in her chair, her thin hands resting on her lap. Her eyes studied him carefully, almost as if she was seeing not just the man before her, but the story of his entire life. David shifted slightly, unsure of what she meant to reveal. David, she said softly, I want to share something with you, something I do not tell just anyone. He nodded, his deep voice calm. I'm listening. Margaret's gaze drifted to the wall where a faded photograph hung. It showed a younger version of herself, standing proudly in front of a large office building, a certificate in her hand. Many years ago, she began, I was not just an ordinary woman. I built a company with my late husband. We worked hard, day and night, until it became one of the strongest businesses in this city. David raised his brows slightly. He hadn't expected this. The woman who stood shivering in the rain just minutes ago was once a leader, someone who had held power and respect. But time changes everything, Margaret continued. Her voice trembled with memory. When my husband passed away, I was left alone. The board of directors slowly pushed me aside. They thought an old woman could not lead. I gave up my chair, but not my heart. I still hold part of what we built. She paused, her lips tightening. And I still hold the power to decide what happens next. David's chest tightened with curiosity, but he stayed quiet, letting her speak. Margaret's eyes turned back to him. Tonight, you could have walked past me like everyone else, but you did not. You gave me shelter without asking who I was or what I could give in return. That is rare, David, very rare. He lowered his eyes humbly. It was the right thing to do. Margaret, anyone with a heart should do the same. She shook her head gently. No, the world is not as kind as you believe. I'd have lived long enough to see it, and that is why I feel something tonight, something stronger than chance. David sipped the last of his tea, the warmth running down his throat. He didn't fully understand where her words were leading, but he sensed something important was coming. Margaret stood slowly, steadying herself on the arm of the chair. She walked to a small cabinet near the corner of the room. Her hand shook as she unlocked a drawer and pulled out a thick envelope, sealed with wax. She held it close to her chest for a moment, before turning back to David. This, she said, her voice low but steady, is not just paper. Inside is the future of my company, my wealth, my legacy. For a long time, I did not know who to trust with it. But tonight, in the rain, I felt something. I saw a man whose heart is stronger than any contract. I saw you, David. David froze, the weight of her words sinking deep. Margaret, I don't understand. Why me? I'm just a worker. I don't have much. I don't know anything about companies or wealth. Margaret walked closer and placed the envelope on the table in front of him. Her wrinkled fingers brushed against the paper. Because you are honest. Because you are kind when no one is watching. Those are the people who deserve trust, not those who chase money or power. David stared at the envelope, his heart pounding. The storm outside had quieted, but inside him, a storm of thoughts raged. Could this be real? Why would an old woman give something so important to a stranger she had just met? He looked up at her, his voice almost breaking. Margaret, I helped you because it was right, not because I wanted anything back. I cannot take this. Her eyes softened, tears glistening. I know, David. That is exactly why I want you. 2. This is not payment. This is trust. I have family who only see me as a burden, friends who disappeared when I grew old, but you, a stranger, treated me like I mattered. David rubbed his forehead, trying to steady himself. This is too much. I don't even know what to say. Margaret reached across the table and touched his hand gently. Her voice was almost a whisper. Say nothing. Just promise me one thing, that you will use this gift not only for yourself, but to help others. Promise me you will carry the same kindness you showed me tonight. David felt his throat tighten. He wanted to refuse again, but her eyes, full of sincerity, held him in place. Slowly, he nodded. I promise. A quiet relief spread over Margaret's face. She leaned back, her shoulders easing, as though a great burden had finally been lifted. The envelope sat on the table between them, glowing faintly in the lamplight. Not with money or power, but with meaning. Outside, the drizzle stopped. The storm had passed. The night grew still, as if the world itself was waiting for what came. Next, David didn't know how his life would change after this evening. But one thing was certain. Kindness had opened a door he never imagined. And Margaret, the woman he sheltered, had given him not just a gift, but a destiny. The promise-tested night grew still after the storm, as though the world was holding its breath. Inside Margaret's home, the envelope sat on the table between her and David, glowing faintly under the lamp. To David, it felt heavier than any object he had ever touched, not because of its weight, but because of the meaning behind it. He leaned forward, his hands clasped together, his voice low. Margaret, I don't know if I'm worthy of this. I'm just an ordinary man. I work long hours. I barely get by. I don't know anything about wealth or companies. Margaret looked at him with calm but steady eyes. David, wealth and power in the wrong hands destroy people, but in the right hands, they can build lives. I have seen greedy men run businesses and ruin families. You may not know about companies, but you know about kindness. That is the rarest knowledge of all. Her words pressed against his heart. He wanted to believe her, but doubt still clung to his mind. Could he really carry such responsibility? The clock ticked loudly in the silence, each second making the decision heavier. Finally, David said softly, I promise you I'd carry your kindness forward, but I must ask, why me? Margaret, why trust me so quickly? She smiled faintly, her wrinkled lips curving with tired wisdom, because sometimes the heart sees what the eyes cannot. Tonight, when you stopped for me in the rain, I felt my husband's spirit whisper to me, this man is different. I choose to listen to that voice. Before David could respond, there was a sharp knock on the door. Both of them turned quickly, startled. Margaret's face darkened with worry. She stood slowly, leaning on the table. Who could that be at this hour? David whispered. Another knock came, louder this time. Margaret's eyes flickered with unease. It might be them, she murmured under her breath. David frowned. Them? Before she could explain, the knocking turned into pounding. David rose quickly and walked to the door. He opened it slightly, and the cold night air rushed. And 2 men in dark coats stood outside, rain still dripping from their shoulders. Their faces were sharp, their eyes narrow. One of them spoke in a cold tone. Evening. Is Mrs. Margaret here? David stiffened. Yes, she is. And who are you? The man smirked. We're family. Nephews. Just checking on her. His voice was smooth, but his eyes carried greed. Margaret's voice trembled from behind David. Go away. Harold, I know why you are here. You only come when you want something. The taller man, Harold, leaned forward, his smile thin, and don't be so harsh. We just want to make sure you're comfortable. You shouldn't be alone. Why not let us take care of things for you? David glanced back at Margaret, who gripped the arm of the chair, her face pale. He could see her fear. And he understood instantly these men were not here out of love. They wanted what she had. I think it's best if you leave now, David said firmly, stepping slightly in front of Margaret. His tall frame blocked the doorway. The shorter man sneered. And who are you? Some stranger. You think you can tell us what to do? David's voice didn't rise, but his tone carried strength. I'm the man making sure Margaret is safe. Tonight, she doesn't want to see you, so leave. For a moment, silence stretched. Rainwater dripped from their coats onto the porch. Then Harold's smile faded into anger. This isn't over. We'll be back. The two men turned sharply and walked into the night. Their footsteps splashed against the wet ground until they disappeared into the shadows. David closed the door slowly, locking it tight. When he turned, Margaret's hands were trembling. He rushed to her side. "Margaret, are you all right?" She nodded faintly, though her eyes glistened with tears. "Those men are my late husband's relatives. They never cared for me, but they always wanted the company. They think I'm weak now, and that they can take it from me. That's why I needed someone like you, David. Someone strong, but kind. Someone who will protect not just the company, but the people it supports." David sat back down, his jaw tight. He had faced hardships before, nights of hunger, days of rejection, but this was different. This was a fight not just against poverty, but against greed. Margaret reached across the table, her frail hand covering his. "This is your test, David. If you accept this gift, you will not only carry my trust, but you will face those who want to steal it. That is why I chose you, because I believe you will not bend." David looked into her eyes. He saw no weakness there, only a lifetime of battles. He felt a fire stir inside him, a determination he had long buried under the weight of survival. "I promise you, Margaret," he said firmly, his voice deep and steady, "I will not let anyone harm you or take what belongs to you. If I carry this gift, I will protect it. I will protect you." Her lips trembled into a smile, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Then I know I made the right choice." The clock struck midnight, the sound echoing through the small house. The envelope still lay on the table, but now it felt less like paper and more like destiny. David knew the path ahead would not be easy. Greedy men would come. Challenges would rise. But he also knew his promise was stronger than any storm, and somewhere deep inside, he felt that the storm outside had only been the beginning. The true storm was yet to come. The new dawn night passed slowly after Margaret's nephews left. Though the storm outside had ended, a different storm still lingered inside David's chest. He sat awake in the wooden chair, watching the envelope on the table as though it were alive, heavy with responsibility. Margaret had dozed off in her chair, her head tilted slightly to one side. The lamplight softened her face, showing both her age and her strength. David admired her courage. Even in weakness, she was still standing against greed. He pulled a blanket over her shoulders and sat quietly, his thoughts racing. Why me? He asked himself again and again. Why trust a stranger with so much? But each time he remembered the look in her eyes, the certainty, the faith, and he felt the weight of his promise. By morning, golden sunlight broke through the curtains. The storm had left behind a fresh world. The streets outside glistened with rainwater, and the air smelled clean, washed free of the night's heaviness. Birds began to sing softly, their voices fragile, but full of hope. Margaret stirred awake, her eyes blinking open. When she saw David still there, her lips curved into a gentle smile. "You stayed," she whispered. David nodded. "I wanted to make sure you were safe." She sat up slowly, her hands gripping the arms of the chair. "You remind me of my husband," she said softly. "He was a man who believed in honor more than wealth. You carry the same spirit." David lowered his head humbly, unsure how to respond. After a quiet breakfast of tea and bread, Margaret stood with surprising strength. She walked to a small desk and opened a drawer. From it, she took out several documents, old, worn, but carefully kept. She placed them on the table beside the envelope. "David," she said firmly, "today is the day you step into a new life. These papers, along with what is in the envelope, will give you authority in the company. It will not be easy. The board will resist you. My relatives will try to destroy you, but I believe you are strong enough." David touched the edge of the papers with his fingers. His hand shook slightly. "Margaret, I've worked all my life with my hands. I've fixed roads, carried loads, done jobs no one else wanted. I've never worn a suit, never stood in a meeting. How can I lead anything?" Margaret reached out, her voice gentle, but full of power. "A leader is not made by suits or meetings. A leader is made by his heart, and your heart is the strongest I have seen in many years." Her words lit something deep inside him. For the first time, David began to believe it might be true, but just as hope was rising, the peace was broken. The sound of a car screeched outside. Tires splashed through puddles. Then came another sharp knock on the door, louder, harder than before. David stood at once, his muscles tense. Margaret's eyes darkened with worry. He opened the door carefully, this time not to but 3 men stood outside. Harold, the tall nephew, was in front. His face was twisted with anger. "We warned you last night," he hissed. "Now step aside. My aunt is not well enough to handle her affairs. We'll take over from here." David's jaw tightened. "She's well enough to decide for herself, and she's already decided. Leave." Harold pushed forward, but David planted his feet like a wall. "You don't belong here," Harold spat. "You're nothing but a stranger." David's voice dropped, strong and steady. "Maybe I am a stranger, but I am the one who stayed in the storm when you didn't. I am the one who will protect her, even if it costs me." For a moment, the air grew heavy. The other men shifted, uncertain. Harold sneered, but something in David's eyes made him hesitate. There was no fear there, only unshakable resolve. Margaret's voice rose behind David, sharp and clear. "Harold, enough. You may carry my blood, but you do not carry my heart. You will never touch what my husband and I built. I have chosen David, and that choice is final." Her words cut through the morning air like thunder. Harold's face twisted with rage, but he could not push past both David's strength and Margaret's authority. Finally, with a curse under his breath, he turned and stormed away, the others following reluctantly. Their car roared off, leaving. Only silence behind Dot. David closed the door firmly, his chest rising and falling with the weight of what had just happened. Margaret, though shaken, stood tall. She walked to him, her hand resting gently on his arm. "You see now, David, this is what I meant. Kindness is powerful, but it must also be strong. Today, you proved you are both." David looked at her, his heart heavy yet full. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but I swear to you, Margaret, I will not fail you." Her eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of relief, of hope. "Then my work is done. You are ready." As the sunlight grew brighter, filling the small home, David felt something he hadn't in years: purpose. He was no longer just a man surviving day by day. He was standing at the edge of something greater. The storm had brought him to Margaret. The rain had opened the door, and now, with her trust and the promise he carried, a new dawn had begun in his life, one that would change not just his future, but the lives of many who would one day follow his lead.